So,
Hey, everybody.
so just to tell everyone, this lecture is being recorded and it's going to be published on Srednja HR, which is for foreigners the biggest portal for high school graduate students and university students. So yeah, I guess we should start. So it's my really such honor to host Heidi Roizen today at Summer School of Science, especially after the Science of Bias lecture we had yesterday. I'm sure you know all about her, but and actually I had such a hard time to pick anything from her CV to introduce her today, but let me try. So Heidi is a venture capitalist. She's a corporate director and Stanford lecturer. She's one of the early internet software entrepreneurs and one of the first female CEOs in Silicon Valley in the 80s. So she was leading T-Marker company. She's also a former Apple executive, and she has, little to say, a very rich experience in business and technology. And as we all know, she's also famous for Heidi Roizen case taught to Harvard Business School students, which is actually about networking in business world. But this was the base for Heidi versus Howard study conducted in 2003 that showed that likability and success are positively correlated for men, but negatively correlated for women. And today, Heidi is going to talk about her career, networking, and of course, female business leaders. So Heidi, a warm welcome to Summer School of Science.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, are you ready for lots of questions that we have?
I am ready for lots of questions. Are you going to ask? You're going to ask me, right? I'm not going to go down the list. You're going to give up, right?
So I would really like to start with networking, since this is what you're actually famous for. And as I said, like even Harvard made a case about it, and it's taught to business students, even like today as well. So I would really like to ask you, since everyone in the summer school is really at the early stages of their career, from your perspective, what is the most important thing when building business relationships and your network in general? Maybe you could give them a bit of a background on what networking actually means.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I don't, in a funny way, even though I'm known for that, and if you Google business network, you might get me. I actually don't like that term because to me it implies sort of using something. And I think about it more in the following way. I think about it being the benefits of leading a relationship-driven life as opposed to a transaction-driven life. So in a transaction-driven life, it's all about what am I going to get from this person, and everything is sort of a unique thing, and maybe you're always trying to optimize, and I think that's a bad way to live. In a relationship-driven life, what you're thinking is, who am I going to align with? Who am I going to work with? Who am I going to, in fact, I even call them fellow travelers in life. And how am I going to be a good citizen and a good partner to everyone I encounter to the best of my ability? Because first of all, that's just, it makes you happy. It's a good general lesson in happiness, but it also is good for business. What I have found in my, so I'm 64, I've been working in Silicon Valley since I was 21. So, 43 years of work, is you do run into many of the same people over and over and over again. And your reputation and your ethics and what people think about you and how willing people are to be helpful to you, those are all very important things in terms of your ability to get anything done. Because other than some people who manage to be great inventors and individual contributors, most of us who end up working, particularly if you're going to work in entrepreneurship or in executive management, you accomplish things through other people. And your ability to work with people and get people to come along with you and do things with you and want to be helpful to you is going to dictate that. So there's, to me, one of the things I also like about this is very, in a way, it's very simple. if you think to yourself, my goal is always to build a relationship with this other person, independent of the thing I'm negotiating right now, right? Independent of the transaction that I have with this other person right at the moment. In a way, that's very basic because we're all people first. And we all sort of have a basic understanding of people want to be respected. People want to be listened to. People want to be appreciated. People want to know that you put time and effort into a meeting with them, that you did your homework, that you say thank you afterwards. There's some things that are just so simple. It sounds like, you know, stuff your mom told you. And yet this really is, I think, in many ways, the secret to leading a really great career.
So how do I actually start a relationship? Do I need to have a starting point, something where I can build a relationship around? Or
yeah, I think that's, I mean, there are a few things. One is a commonality, common interest, right? So everyone in this room should walk away from this experience knowing something about at least some of the other people. It's not a numbers game. It's not about how many business cards you can collect in a meeting or things like that. It's about, can you find connection with people that you can, you know, that you can begin something. I think that it's very hard to have a relationship with someone, especially if you're approaching someone who's a busy person, who's farther along in life than you, and to say, you know, will you be my mentor? Will you take time with me? It's a little bit like, you know, will you be my pen pal? It's like, I don't have a kernel, a thing to work with on you. I do think that it's much easier to develop that with someone when you can share a work product. So what does that mean? It means, for example, volunteering for an organization where there might be someone interesting in the leadership that you could do. It might mean when you're in an organization, looking across the organization to say, it isn't just about my job, but who else can I work with? Who else in the organization might be doing something interesting that I can be helpful with? A lot of organizations today also have internal clubs, groups, affinity groups, things like that, who maybe there's special projects you can do. You know, there are all sorts of things I think you can do like that. And then I think it is important to think about, what can I offer? And sometimes, you know, you're not the person who can offer a lot. I mean, I think that in a way, someone always has something to offer, even being kind, respectful, thankful, and making really efficient use of someone's time is in a way offering something, because people are generally wired to be helpful, I find. And so if you are a respectful counterpart to that, that usually leaves the other person walking away with a good feeling, which is what you want, right? Is to have put your best efforts into making their use of time on you something useful and enjoyable. And so it isn't always about what you can offer, but it is about, you know, again, about that respect and also recognize that, you know, you'll probably get turned down a lot. That is the thing. I mean, I think what holds a lot of people back is fear. What if I send an email and it doesn't get answered? Well, who cares? Email's free. It doesn't matter. You know what? Yeah, I think that again, you have to go out there expecting that not everyone is going to be responsive. Not everyone is going to be helpful, but that's okay. Those, you don't need everyone in order for it to be successful.
Actually, how we got connected was basically by one email that started this whole conversation. So
that's right. See, it works.
Sometimes you're really one email away from something that you really want. Thank you. That was actually a great opening. And here we have Eva as well, that has some really good questions on digital communication.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eva. I will be the other moderator today. So basically, my first question is, obviously we are in a digital age, a digital era, and young people are communicating more with cell phones, computers, internet. And some people are making arguments basically that it negatively affects their social skills, their in-person skills. So what would you say about that, considering networking? Do you really think that digital media can really negatively affect networking in a way, because young people are losing their social in-person skills maybe?
Yeah, well, I have a funny story about that because I've been quite isolated through COVID, because especially if you're older, as I am, certainly before there were vaccines, you had to be careful. And I have found that as I get back out there and I go to conferences and meetings and things, I'm exhausted because I don't even remember what it's like to be on for 8 hours and to be in a room and talking to people you don't know, and just the physical movement of place to place. And, you know, it's almost like a skill you have to relearn. So I do think, look, I think that there are pros and cons to every form of communication. I mean, look at what we're doing this morning. This wouldn't be possible if it weren't for digital communication. And so I think that as you think about your life and connecting to other people, digital communication is just another tool to use. It isn't a replacement for certain things. There are certain things that one-on-one meetings are the only way to do it in live, you know, a live meeting. I think there are benefits. I do a lot of my meetings with people as walks. And the reason I like going on a walk is you can't look at your phone while you're walking with me, especially if we're on a hill. And so I do feel that picking the right medium for communication is very important. And so someone who is 100% of their time isolated and only online is going to miss some of that opportunity for more stream of consciousness, more serendipity, more that chance of who are you going to meet somewhere that you wouldn't have met otherwise. Because again, in a forum like this, it's very hard to meet new people one-on-one, where if you were at a conference or at a school or something like that, you would. So I just would encourage everyone, when you think about who you're trying to reach and what you're trying to accomplish, thinking about what the best medium, you know, and sometimes some are just not available to you, right? I mean, you know, you can only use in certain cases what's available to you. But I think that the advent, you know, and I've been, you know, I'm old enough to remember, like, there used to be a world before email, right? You know, even email, let alone all the other ways we have to communicate. I think that you know, that today the ability to use, whether it's email or messaging or you know, video or other things is actually a great advantage.
Thank you. Yeah. So there is a saying in Silicon Valley that no one takes you serious until you have, what, 2 failed startups, right? So, considering your career and experiences from many companies and positions and industries, have you, if you would like to share that, of course, have you ever experienced any kind of failure, and how did you?
All the time, you know. I mean, that's look. Failure is an interesting thing, because we say, oh, we celebrate failure. Oh, it's great. And, you know, let me tell you something. Failure sucks. It feels bad. It hurts. Sometimes you lose financial, you know, you end up, you know, losing money that you saved to do something. It can sometimes hurt your reputation. And so I don't think that the whole celebrate failure, I think there is a bigger story there to that. Why do we celebrate failure? It's not because failure is the goal, but failure is a part of the learning process to get to the right place. And so to me, the idea that when you fail, and we fail all the time, I fail every day in something, then what you say to yourself is, why did I fail? And what can I learn from that experience? And are there any amends I need to make? You know, did I fail because I did something wrong that I need to go correct with somebody? And so I do think failure is a great teacher, but I don't think that one should, when you fail, if you didn't learn anything from the failure, that was just pain with no gain. And so thinking really thoroughly about that, you know, when we get pitched, you know, I'm a venture capitalist is my day job. And generally speaking, when people pitch us about raising money, they often have had a failure in their past. They've often, you know, they've had something that they did that didn't work. And if they can tell us why it didn't work, and they can say, you know, it didn't work because we misunderstood the supply chain, or we didn't get the business model right, right? The worst thing, by the way, is when someone says, well, my company failed because no one would fund me. It's their fault, right? Well, I got to tell you, I'm sitting this morning in the world epicenter of venture capital. If nobody was willing to give you money, of the thousands of firms that do that for a living, it probably wasn't their fault. There was probably something about what you were doing that was not fundable, and you should recognize that, right? And so, you know, I do think one of the very interesting things to do, and I'm sorry I don't have this in front of me, but I'm sure you can find it with a couple. I'm sure you're all very good at Google searches. I think it was TechCrunch or one of the Silicon Valley media companies has done like a compendium of failure. So anyone who's had a failure, startup failure database, I think if you just Google that, you'll probably find it. And entrepreneurs go on and explain why they failed. And I find that fascinating reading. It's like psychology, because some of them actually have really thoughtful, you know, here's how we failed. I didn't pay attention to this, or I did a bad contract, or you know, there are tremendous learnings in there. And while no, it's never as impactful to learn reading someone else's story as it is to live it yourself, I think it's a wealth of information. But then there are people who fail because they did something wrong, they don't see it. And to me, the leading marker is when they say, well, I couldn't raise any more money, and that was someone else's fault, right? Because there are so many companies in the business of providing money that now let me give you a caveat. When you're not sitting in the world epicenter of venture capital, you know, your location itself is a challenge when it comes to fundraising, right? Especially at the very early stages, there is a geographical impediment. So, and because you're all quite young, you know, until you get some more experience, age might be an impediment too. So if you all go out tomorrow and say, well, Heidi Roizen said, if I can't raise money for my startup, there must be something wrong with me. Please don't take that away from what I just said, because that's not really, you know, that's not what I'm saying. I mean, it's still very hard to raise money. You have to be in the right market at the right time. You have to have you know, you have to work the connections to get there. I'm not saying it's easy, but my particular comment is when I read these like failures of startups, all of those have already raised money. They were already successful in raising money, and then they couldn't raise more. And that to me is what I'm saying is the negative signal. I mean, unfortunately, it still is pretty hard to raise money for the first time.
But what do you tell yourself in a moment where you see things actually might fail? There is a really high chance that I fail. How do you encourage yourself to try again?
Well, I mean, again, I do feel very lucky that I live in a culture where people don't socially ostracize you for failure, right? I mean, that is something, and I've lived a few other places in the world, and certainly visited many places, and I do think that culturally, it's very interesting, you know, what cultural makeup do you come from in terms of risk, you know, your risk tolerance and others' risk tolerance, and how your parents will feel about it, and how your social circle will feel about it. I think it's really interesting that like where I am, it's almost like if you go get a degree from Stanford and then you go work for Google, you failed because you didn't start your own company. Like, it's crazy, right? Where I know in other places, it's like, if you turned down a job from Google to start your own company, people would think you were crazy, you know? So it is somewhat culturally dependent. For me, picking up and moving on, I think that the people that allow a failure to knock them down and keep them down and hide and never say anything again and never get out there again. I mean, you know, believe me, the hardest thing in the world is to hold your head up and go out when you've just had some sort of big failure that's been blasted on, you know, and of course, the higher profile you have, the more it's maybe been picked up in the news, or it's certainly the talk of the town. You know, I've been through, you know, I left my job at Apple, and it was a very high profile job. And so there were all these articles about why did I leave? And was I forced out, which I wasn't. And, you know, but it's all that I went through a messy divorce that was out in the public because, you know, I mean, you go through stuff, and if you let it defeat you, it will defeat you, right? I mean, defeat is in many ways a choice. You're choosing to let all that affect you. I even think, you know, small failures, I even believe today, I look at honestly, I look at so much pain, particularly young people go through by social media, and how you're responded to on social media, and your need for acceptance on social media. And if people say bad things about you on social media, how traumatizing it is. I will tell you my secret to this. I don't even read the responses to what I post on social media. I don't even look at it because generally speaking, social media brings out the worst in people. And likewise, the nice stuff people write on social media, it's so easy. It's a throwaway thing, right? Attaboy, Heidi, or yay, this is so great. I mean, once in a while I do write a blog post every once in a while, and I do see whether people are forwarding it or commenting on it, because I want to know if the information was useful. But if somebody I don't even know, you know, if you're going to let your day be ruined by someone you don't even know writing, you know, you're a stupid idiot on your social media post, that's you're going to have a long and miserable life if you let stuff like that bother you. So I do think you have to consider, you know, that and again, this goes back to this thing, certain forms of communication, because they can be both friction-free and anonymous, can actually elicit very bad communication. And it's a, you know, it's an unintended consequence of the nature of the design of that platform. And I think you have to be very careful not to let yourself get dragged down. Pretty much not letting anything drag you down is the most important thing, to develop that resilience. And you know, one thing I can tell you all, and it still works for me at 64 now. Well, let me tell you, there's a rule called the 20-40-60 rule. And I think most of you aren't even 20, so all of these will apply to you. And the rule is, at 20, you're constantly worrying about what other people think of you. At 40, you decide, I am not going to give a damn what other people think of me. And at 60, you come to realize that nobody's really thinking about you. And so I find this very liberating, because even now at 60, I recognize that I might just be agonizing over something I said or did that, you know, that I had to have a difficult conversation with somebody yesterday, right? And I woke up this morning thinking, oh my God, I wonder if those, you know, those people are talking about me or whatever. And then I had to remind myself, Heidi, nobody really cares about me that much. Nobody cares about what I said yesterday, right? Life goes on. And so agonizing over, while I do think it's important to be reflective and to think about what I said and what I did, and could I do a better job next time? Did I communicate properly? But then let it go. Because honestly, you know, even your parents probably don't spend that much time thinking about you. They have their own stuff to deal with. And so it is just sort of, we are, as humans, we each operate in the center of our own universe. And sometimes it's really healthy to remind yourself that you are not the center. You probably are not the center of anyone else's universe. And that's very comforting, I think.
Actually, thank you very much for bringing up the story of being in the spotlight, because you've also been famous for some non-business stuff that we've been talking about for quite some time now. And this is, of course, Heidi versus Howard study. So yeah, so how did you feel when the study actually came out, and how do you see it now, almost like 20 years after?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. And I learned about it a really random way, because the professor who did the Heidi versus Howard study, he didn't really publish the the reason I found out is my nephew was a student of his, and we have the same last name. And he said, oh, are you related to Heidi Roizen? And my nephew said, yeah, you know, she's my aunt. And he said, oh, I did this interesting study. And so my nephew connected us on email, and he shared it with me. And then he ended up sharing it with Sheryl Sandberg, and she put it in her first book. And anyway, it kind of took on this big life of its own. So you know, my joke is I should just change my name to Howard because that would help my career. But, you know, I'm surprised and not surprised, because I do think that again, this goes back to society and societal norms. I think that most societies accept that men are wired to be more assertive and aggressive, and that interaction, when you interact with a man and he's assertive or aggressive, that's accepted, right? That's okay. And when a woman is assertive or aggressive, that society believes that is not okay. And so I really do think that the Heidi Howard study, and it was repeated many years later and kind of had the same result, is that when people read it and they read it as a man, they don't look at the things I do as, you know, they don't look at my desire to make deals and put people together and do things as feminine. And so I get sort of I am less liked than a man. If a man were to do those things, it just is considered part of maleness. And so now I will tell you, I don't feel in real life, you know, case studies are interesting because they're, you know, my case study is not, here's Heidi Roizen's biography, right? It's written to teach something. And so it's not a full picture of my life. Like, one of the things I think is funny about the case is people will say to people, I've watched people teach the case, and there's this sort of belief that I have no real friends. Like, all my friends are people that I manipulate to do business with, which is not true. I have many real friends that have nothing. They're just not in the case. You know, it's just, that's not interesting from a case perspective. And so I do think anytime you read a case, you have to recognize that it's not a full picture of in fact, there's a great quote. I don't know who said this, but they said, the full story of anything has never been written. And I love that statement, because really anything you read about anyone is always going to be a limited set of data from one person's perspective in order to make a point. And so it's not really the full picture of anything. So you know, I think by and large, you know, I certainly have been able to accomplish enough in my career that I feel content with it. I don't feel that being a woman has held me back. I do think occasionally I still might find a place where I've said something and, you know, for example, I don't know how comfortable everyone is with swear words, right? But if can I swear? I mean, you guys won't hold that against me, right? Okay. Like, if I say the word fuck in a board meeting, people are shocked. Like, if I say, well, that is just a fucking disaster. Like, I can see sometimes that people are visibly uncomfortable. But if a man says it, it doesn't seem to have the same impact. Now, I'm not recommending that all of you go out and swear in your next meeting. I actually would say, I didn't even use that word in a meeting until I was well into my 40s, even though I'm pretty sure I knew it for a long time, right? Because it, you know, I have the luxury of using colorful language, because when I'm in a board meeting, I'm usually, you know, the biggest shareholder on the board. And so I can get away with it. And I have found, for example, and there's actually, again, if you want to Google some interesting stuff, there's, and of course this is in the English language. I don't know how it affects any other language, but there's some interesting data about using swear words in business and whether that's helpful or hurtful. And my comment would be, sometimes as a woman, I find it breaks some ice when I use a swear word, because they don't expect it from me. And also it gives everyone else the license to use a swear word, where sometimes if I'm the only woman in the room, they all feel like they're not supposed to be their normal selves, because I'm in the room and I might, you know, I don't know what, melt or run out of the room if somebody says a swear word. You know, and so sometimes it destigmatizes the usage of colorful language if you yourself use it, but it's very delicate. I'm not suggesting you guys all go out there and do it, but I'm just saying that as a woman, I have found that sometimes when you use language in a certain way, it has a much bigger impact than if a man were to use it, both positive and negative.
So actually, Cheryl says that you should, if you're a woman, you should always sit at the table, right? You use swear words to break the ice sometimes.
I want that goddamn seat. No. No, I'm also a believer, and again, this is nuanced, but I'm also a believer in using humor, right? I'll give you an example of, and humor, you have to be delicate about it because humor is in the eye of the beholder, and you have to be careful if you do too much self-deprecation. If you're making fun of yourself too much, that might not be a good idea. Again, I have the luxury of doing that sometimes because I am in a position of power. And so if I come in and I self-deprecate, sometimes it makes people feel more comfortable. But for example, I was one time in a meeting, I was the only woman in there, and it was a very heated discussion about something. And the chairman of the board suggested we all take a break, but the men kept talking, and they went in the men's room, and they were still talking about the topic that I needed to be in that conversation. And so I knocked on the men's room door and I said, "Hey boys, if you keep talking during the break, I'm coming in there." And so everyone laughed, but it made the point, right? The point was we were having a business meeting. I need to be part of that meeting, and they can't continue to have the conversation in a room that I'm literally not supposed to go in. And so I do think sometimes, being able to use a little bit of humor to make your point is really important. And for example, if you don't understand something, and again, I have a little easier because I'm not trying to make my mark there, but if I'm in a meeting and I don't understand something, I might say, "Hey, look, you guys are like PhDs in this category. I only have a second grade education when it comes to whatever it is. So you're going to have to help me out understanding this here. Can you point me in the right direction?" Being able to use sort of colorful language instead of saying, "I don't get it," is to say, "You're like PhDs and I'm like a second grader here." It just, again, it humanizes. I think in a lot of what I'm saying, I'm suggesting that one way to get ahead and to make a platform for yourself is this genuine humanization of the communication that you're having.
So this is actually a really nice transition into our next question, and that is obviously you are CEO in the Silicon Valley. So how do you, as a woman, really deal with these big personalities that you may come across, or women in the CEO positions are often viewed as bossy?
Yeah.
And yeah. Unfortunately, it is that way. So basically, how do you deal with that?
Well, look, I don't get hired because it's nice to be liked, okay? But you don't get hired because you're likable. You get hired because you can perform. And performance, especially in a leadership role, means getting other people to do things. And that isn't always, part of it is, I think, people help me because they genuinely like me and they know that I always come in and again, I'll give you the basics because I think you need to be competent. First and foremost, you need to be competent at what you do. And how do you become competent? You work at it, right? You do what you're doing. You go to classes and you learn things and you read and you study. And one of the things, and I'll tell you this today, it's no secret. I'm on these boards of these big companies. Most people don't do the homework. They don't read the whole deck. They don't study the financials. They don't look every day on news and see what news is about the company. They don't follow up when they say they're going to follow up. These are all, again, this goes back to sort of, these are basic skills, but if you apply them consistently, you'll usually outperform most other people because most other people are not applying even basic skills like always doing the reading, always doing the homework, and always being prepared, always following up, always being respectful, remembering to say thank you if somebody has done something nice for you. These are the things you do to build that base of collaboration that a lot of people don't do. And so for me, I do believe it, another thing is that you can separate, I've had to fire people. I've had to fire many people. and firing someone is not fun. And it usually, when you fire someone, they don't go home and tell their spouse what an awesome person you are, right? I mean, and yet if you can help someone understand, you know, you like I remember, I remember one time I had a conversation with someone, and at the end I said, so you're just not the right person for this job. And he said, wait, are you firing me? And I said, well, yes, I am, but it's not that you're a bad person. It's just the fit between what you know how to do and what this job needs is a bad fit. And I actually believe when you are, this is probably self-justification because I've fired a lot of people, if you can get someone out of a job they're not good at and free them up to go to a job that they could be good at, you're actually doing them a favor. They may not see it at the moment you're doing it, but I believe that if you are in a job where you're not performing and your manager knows you're not performing and you stay in that job, you're not helping yourself have the best career or the most fulfilling life possible. And so, you know, I do think that at the end of the day, you know, just being liked isn't enough. And that's where I've had to be, you know, you have to give up being liked in order to be competent sometimes.
Yeah. Great. Also, what I got really from what you were saying is that maybe sometimes charisma is really important. So I wanted to ask you, is charisma something you can learn, or is it just something that people are born with? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I mean, I think that so there is, there's actually an interesting correlation. Again, another good article to read is about narcissistic CEOs. So there's been some studies done on narcissist CEOs and the fact that because they do believe in themselves almost to an unreasonable degree, and they do believe that the rules don't apply to them, and you know, there are some famous narcissistic CEOs, right? Steve Jobs and the Uber founder, and I mean, I can go through the list. There's a lot of narcissistic CEOs, and I don't personally love working with narcissists because sometimes they get in a lot of trouble. You know, the problem is when you read about narcissistic successes, they don't usually point out all the narcissistic failures, right? The articles that talk about how a narcissist has a leg up because they're so compelling because they believe in what they're doing and they know how to get other people to go along with them. They don't always succeed, but the failures are not the ones that Fortune magazine is writing about. And so, you know, I think, look, I've had to work with a lot of big personalities, and I think with those personalities, you have to figure out, you know, what is the communication that's going to work? What's going to motivate them to do something? How much ego stroking do you need to do? How, you know, you have to learn that some people just, this is how they operate. And do I think they make better CEOs? No, I think that sometimes they're better at raising money because again, when you're sitting in, you know, my job, I have to meet with 100 people, and out of those 100, I'm going to write a check to one. Right? So if you think about that, right, in typical venture Series A, we'll probably take 100 meetings to do one deal. And if you meet with someone who says, well, I have this idea, I'm not really sure if it's going to work. I don't really know if I want to do it. I once had a meeting with an entrepreneur who pitched me the deal at the end, and they go, well, what do you think of the idea? Because I'm not really sure about the idea. And I said, honest to God, if you walk in a meeting and if you're not sure about the idea, why would I back it? Right? I mean, you're the entrepreneur. You're the one who's supposed to be the expert here. We're not the experts. And so it is true that when somebody walks in and says, I am going to change the world and I am absolutely going to do it, and here's how I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to fail, right? That bravado, okay, there's a certain level of it that's just too over the top, and you kind of go, okay, that person's crazy. But for a lot of, you know, this early stage investing, you know, someone's own belief in their ability to do something. And it also indicates that someone's going to have some resilience when things get tough, that they're going to keep powering through. And like I said, that's an important component of making any startup successful, because you will have failures, right? You will have to power through failure. There is not a company on the planet that's successful today that didn't have its share of dire near-death failure situations. And, you know, that belief that you're going to prevail is important to having companies be successful, your ability to get up and power through. But that doesn't mean those are easy people to work with. And it doesn't mean you should cultivate. I don't think anyone should aspire to be a narcissist. And I think narcissism is sort of an inherent trait, although I think a lot of times narcissism arises in childhood, the parent-child relationship. And so again, another thing I think for any of you who want to be leaders, read up as much as you can on psychology, because human psychology is really, is really the driver of many things. And so understanding how human psychology works is probably a pretty good play. And plus they're interesting books. You know, what's more interesting than people and how people think? So I would definitely recommend that. But I do think you can develop confidence. I do think, for example, look, I can describe for you all a moment you felt confidence and a moment you didn't feel confidence. You felt confidence when you do a lot of homework and you walk into something well prepared. You don't feel confidence when you do no homework and you walk into something unprepared. And so there's a very simple example, right? Of if you want to have more confidence, do more homework, right? Get yourself better prepared for any situation you're going to be in, because then you will have that confidence. And so that, that doesn't mean you're building charisma. And I do think, like we have this thing over here, Y Combinator. I don't know if you guys have Y Combinator over there, but similar thing, boot camps for entrepreneurs. And I almost laugh when they come out. It's like charm school for entrepreneurs. They all come out and they have the same pitch and they have the same like manner. It's like they taught, it's like acting, they taught them. And to me, that doesn't make me want to invest more in them. That's not good. But the flip side is when you have a pitch from someone and they can't even look at you and they can't articulate why they're bringing value to the table. There are, again, it goes back to communication. A certain amount of leadership communication is live speaking and live public speaking. And if you want to be a leader and you're not good at that, I would strongly recommend you learn how to be better at that. Now, does that mean you're going to be Steve Jobs? Nobody's as good as Steve Jobs. Like that's, but you can learn the difference between mumbling and awkward and being, flat on your feet about something and being a good articulate speaker. You can do debate. You can join clubs like Toastmasters, right? Or other kind of speaking things. Again, if you develop the skill and competency, that is also going to give you confidence, and that confidence is going to show up.
Thank you for great advices. So actually, before we move further, does anyone else wants to ask a question?
I don't know if you can hear me from here.
I can, yeah.
Oh, amazing. All right, I'll struggle a little bit at formulation here. I hope that's okay, because I'm still working on my communication skills.
For sure.
But I was wondering, as you said, the 20, 40, 60 rule, right? How can you try to move more towards 40, even if you're in your 20s, and not care as much? Because I completely agree that, you have to be able to not care about being liked or to make it further in many areas.
Right.
I guess I kind of hard to get that.
That's a great question. And by the way, I don't want you to not pay attention to what anyone thinks of you, right? Because again, none of you will build your career independent of the good graces of other people, right? It's other people who give you the opportunity. It's other people who put in a good word for you. It's other people who make the connection for you. It's other people who serve as a reference, and so again, what I'm saying is I'm not saying don't care at all what other people think of you, right? That's a bad idea. But what I am saying is there's a point at which you ruminate about what other people are thinking about you that is no longer productive. And so one of the tips I would use, and again, you can use this however old you are, is when you find, you ever find yourself, you're lying in bed and you go, why did I say that stupid thing yesterday? Or why did I send that email when I shouldn't have, or, whatever, right? One of the things you can ask yourself, step outside your brain for a second and say, is this thought process productive to me? Right? Is this helping me? Because sometimes thinking about something, thinking about why did I say it that way and could I have said it better, is productive, right? And if it's hard for you to step out of your brain, go find a good friend you can talk to, or imagine you're your own best friend and you articulate like, oh God, I can't believe at that dinner party I told that joke and it wasn't very good, or was politically incorrect or something. And then, say to yourself, is this a productive thought? Well, what would be actionable about this thought? Can I improve for the future? Yes. Well, have I already thought that through? Yes. Okay, well, then I don't need to think about it anymore. Is there someone I need to apologize to? Yes. Well, then I should go do that. Right? So if you are having a productive thought, an actionable thought, then you can go ahead and have that thought. If you are just torturing yourself, self-flagellation, I call it endless spin cycle. You're just doing this. You're just going around and around like a hamster on a wheel, and you're not getting anywhere with this thought. All it is doing is taking up brain time that you should be using on something else. Then you can say to yourself, I need to let this go. And boy, I wish I could tell you how, because letting go is hard, right? And we do tend to rut ourselves out working on the same cycles. But I think this ability to at least have a process for every thought and say, is it productive? Is it actionable? When it is no longer actionable, it's no longer productive. And so I need to leave that thought. And, one of the ways you can leave a thought is to put a new thought in place. So another book I think is really good is the book Atomic Habits. And it's about changing habit, but changing habit is just habits are thoughts put into action, right? And so I do think Atomic Habits is another good book to read about how you can change thought.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you are in a group, either with business or just with friends, and the group is facing a problem, how would you, and you believe that you're the one with possibly the best solution to that problem, how would you go about presenting it and getting through with it?
That's a great question. And I mean, it so much depends on what the group is, what your role is in the group. There's a lot to unpack in those things, but I would generally say that what people tend to do is they think of the solution and they want to put forth their solution, where what would be a better thing to do is agree on what problem you're trying to solve. Because a lot of times people don't even have the same idea of the problem that you're trying to solve. So let me give you an example. This is not a very good example, but it's better than no example. Let's say that you and I are somewhere and I don't know you very well, and I need to get to the airport. And I say to you, will you drive me to the airport? And you say no, because you have a class to go to and you don't know me very well and you're not going to drive me to the airport. So my problem is that I asked you the wrong question, because I asked you my solution to my problem I need to get to the airport is you're going to drive me to the airport. And I just asked you, but you turned me down. But my problem is not, will you drive me to the airport? My problem is I need to get to the airport. And so if instead of saying to you, will you drive me to the airport? If I had instead said to you, my problem is I need to get to the airport. What solution can you help me find a solution? you might know something as a local that I don't know, like, hey, there's a bus to the airport every half hour, or hey, have you heard of this app called Uber? Or, I don't know. But you have, when I articulate only my proposed solution to a problem, I'm missing out on all the other potential solutions to a problem. But if I do a better job articulating the problem, then building solution, you're going to have more potential solutions to a well-articulated problem than only the solution you can come up with. So to your question, if you have a solution, I think sometimes taking a step back and saying, okay, let's just be certain we all understand what is the problem we're trying to solve. And even having everyone participate in articulating the problem, because if the best way to get to a solution is a really good articulation of the problem. And then I think even leading people through that process helps give you a little bit of a platform and a little bit of a voice as well, because generally speaking, people like to participate and they like to be heard and they like to be asked. And if you're asking people, what is the problem we're trying to solve, you're giving them the opportunity to have some airtime and say that. And so again, I mean, it's a fairly generic answer to the question, but I do think that if you can take people on that path and then introduce your solution. And another thing that's good about it is it helps you check your solution against the problem to make sure that it is actually solving the problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. So since you're, of course, an amazing example of female leader, we'd like to steer the conversation in that direction. And so just to open up this topic, I would really like to ask you, you've been there 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and do you think women are still facing the same challenges they were facing 20 years ago? Or how is it for a young female leaders, male leaders to enter a world that's crazy when it gets to some higher positions?
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think in some ways it's much better. I think there's much more awareness that certain behavior is not okay. I think there are more laws. I mean, I can only speak of the US, but I think there are more laws that protect women. And I think that there are, in many ways, we're in a better environment than we were 40 years ago, because things that were acceptable 40 years ago are no longer acceptable. And there are ways to remediate those things. That said, human nature hasn't changed much. And I do think that look, predatory, most men, most women and most men, they just want to be good people and they want to do the right thing. Most people are not out there trying to be evil. I really believe most people are good, but every once in a while there is someone who has predator behavior, and one predator can ruin something for 100 other people or 1,000 other people, right? A predator who's a predator, I've seen companies where one bad person in a company can wreck the entire culture of the company, because especially if they're in a position of power, because they abuse that power and create a culture that is not workable. And so I think that it is better for women. But I do, and I do think, if you're in a company, and that's why you have to be careful when you go to work somewhere, make sure that the company's culture and values align with yours. Because if they are a culture that doesn't, and I think you can being a student of company culture is really interesting. And there are so many, like right now, the big failure stories, right? Theranos, WeWork, the book about Uber, they're fascinating books. I mean, my own experience of 40 years of doing this is startup cultures are very much reflections of the founders' personalities. And again, that's why I say I wouldn't necessarily want to work for a psychopathic, narcissistic CEO, because a lot of those cultures are really toxic cultures. And so even though they get stuff done, right? Sometimes they get stuff done, but at what cost? And so I would be very careful about trying to learn what I can before I go to work for someplace, because it's very hard to change a culture. You can change it if the founder decides it needs to change, and you can change it if you change out the leadership. but it's really hard to change a culture if the leadership doesn't want to change it. It's really hard to change. So I would just, I would say it is better for women now, but you have to be careful about choosing the environment. You have two job choices. One job choice is a place that actually supports and encourages women, and one job place is one that doesn't. Why take on that extra burden, right? Why go to a place that doesn't believe you're an equal citizen? I would just, and again, you collectively have the power of your own effort to go to places that support the kind of cultures that you think are the right cultures. Hard to do though, right? Because sometimes you don't know till you get in there.
I would just really encourage people, you're more than welcome to ask questions. So I think you're pretty good at that.
I think we have a question on from, is it Marija? I see a hand raised on the Zoom screen.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I know you don't know me. I'm Maria. I'm an ex-participant of S3, and that's actually where I met Ivana, and then we actually lived a bit for bachelor studies. So
I'm sorry I mispronounced. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name.
No,
we're all very
absolutely.
jealous of wherever it is you are.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the ambient. Let's just say my travels didn't go as planned.
Looks pretty nice.
So yeah, it's lovely to be back, by the way, to see S3 digitally, and I'm so happy to be here at this talk. I'm so glad Ivana invited me. So my question, I think, touches upon a bit of everything you just mentioned, and it goes towards imposter syndrome. So we're all kind of young at this point, young, probably scientists going on our way to be scientists, with whether you're a high schooler or a bachelor student or just early years of your master's. You're in a position where you have to contact people at the top of their fields, and you're trying to get positions like internships, and you most of the time feel like you don't have anything to offer, or not enough, or why would they take you on? You don't have experience. And so yeah, I was wondering what's your thought about it, because I feel sometimes it even comes from me being a woman, because there is usually more men at the higher positions, so you don't know. You just feel there's more of them, and that they have it, like they're more dominant, that they have it more figured out, and they're just maybe, I don't know, louder, like just dominate the space. So yeah, I was wondering if you ever felt imposter syndrome, or...
Sure, I mean, look, we all feel imposter.
And how do you deal with it?
Now, everyone has an inner critic that says you're not good enough, you're not whatever. And so again, that kind of goes with the 20, 40, 60 thing. Another thing, and that's why I'm such a big believer in reading about human psychology, is sometimes if you just know everyone feels this way, makes you feel a lot better. The other thing is the downside, the cost. Like I said earlier, the cost of sending an email that doesn't get answered is a few minutes of your time and zero, right? But you want to send emails that do get answered. And so that's where I think, again, this belief that other people basically want to be helpful. And I think that when you reach out to someone, thinking about why is it them, right? Why are you reaching out to them? How can you compel them to want to be helpful to you? And part of that is, what is the connection, right? And that ability to say, hey, I'm just starting out, but when I look at the world of careers, and I've read all about you, and your career is the one I want to pursue, something like what you've done. And if I could just have 5 minutes of your time, or if I could have if I could ask you 3 questions, again, being respectful of a person's time, being very specific about what you want to accomplish. Like, I get emails from people and they'll say, hi, your career looks great. Can I spend an hour with you on Zoom so you can give me career advice? That's just not, I can't do that. I get lots of those every day, and I can't do it. But if someone sends me an email and says, I've read all about you, and in particular, I think it's interesting that you were both at Apple and you did a startup. I have 2 job offers. One is a startup and one is working for a big company. And my parents want me to take the big company, but I want to do the startup. Is there one question I should be asking myself? Or can I ask you one question about that? Or here's my one question. Those are compelling things to answer. Also, if you ask me for an hour of my time to meet in person and have a coffee, again, that's maybe solving your problem, but that's not a good use of my time. If you give me something on email and you say, if you had time to talk to me live, that would be great. But if not, even an email responding to this one question would be great. You just gave me more avenues to respond. You also helped me understand better what problem you're trying to solve. I find the weakest requests are these big generic requests, right? And the ones where, and also somebody sends you a super long email. I get hundreds of emails a day. So usually I flip right to the bottom to figure out what the email's about. The shorter and more compelling you make that email, the better it's going to be. And I know we're 2 minutes from being out of time, so I'm going to give you another Google assignment. But there's a Stanford Business School professor named Glenn Cramon, Kramon, and he has a great video, and he's written some stuff. He's actually a Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times editor. And he's written a lot of stuff and talked a lot about how do you reach out in ways that it would get answered. And so I would just look up stuff that Glenn Cramon has written, and he's done some interviews and stuff that I think are really useful to try to better understand how do I make a request that's going to get answered. But to me, the number one thing is make it compelling for me to want to answer. You know, humans love stories. They love to be helpful. They love that story arc, and they like to know that they can uniquely be helpful, right? And understanding why it is you're reaching out to me or to anyone is a big part of that.
Thank you. So since we really do understand you're busy and we really respect your time, I just wanted to ask if we have time for 2 more questions.
Yes. We'd have to go kind of quickly, but I can hold off my other meeting for about 5 minutes. So let me just.
So if anyone from here has a question, yes, I want to ask a question. So there's quite a large misconception that we face as young people in the world with confusion of being what it means to be really busy and what it means to be actually productive. So
yeah,
what being busy is often confused with actually achieving something and being healthy and productive. So what do you think is the secret of actual optimal productiveness while simultaneously staying healthy and still
it's a great question. So one of my partners likes to say, it's not an activity contest, right? It's not about just being active. I believe, first of all, time is super valuable. And the older you get, the more valuable it's going to be to you. And nowadays, there are so many demands and uses on our time. And my belief is time management is one of the most important skills you have to learn. And one of the things is if you fill your calendar up with stuff to do all the time, you don't have time to be thoughtful and reflective and all of that. I like to do a calendar edit. At the end of every week, I look back and I say, what was a good use of my time? What was a bad use of my time? I think because of COVID, we've all done a lot of reevaluation of where did we spend our time and what worked and what didn't work. I think the ability to say no is really important, right? Because everyone has had this experience. You're opening up an email and it says, please join us or come to this thing on an event. And as you're opening it, you're thinking, I hope I have something else to do that day because I really don't want to do this thing. Well, I'm giving you now permission. You don't have to have anything on any day to decide not to do something. Just don't do it. And it's really hard because sometimes it's also your friends or your family members or people you feel you owe something to. But really learning to say no is really important. And the last thing I'll say is why do all meetings have to be an hour long? Or why do all meetings have to be a half hour long? Like, you guys are not yet in the world of meetings, I hope. But, when someone says, I need to meet with you about something, I say, okay, well, I think 10 minutes would do it. And most people are like, no, I need an hour. And I say, okay, well, here's the deal. You can have 10 minutes tomorrow, or you can have an hour in 3 weeks. Which will you take? And almost everyone will take the 10 minutes tomorrow as opposed to waiting 3 weeks to get an hour of my time. And so that really tells you, and being efficient, I think managing interaction, right? Being able to say to people, look, I have 10 minutes. I'm going to, this is what I need, or jumping to the point. Some people just are awkward about getting to the place where you're actually going to make a decision. So I do think time management, super important. And I do think staying on top of your communications too. My email inbox is empty every night when I go to bed. because email is really important to me. It's my lifeblood, right? I'm a partner at a firm. I'm on 5 different boards. Email is how everyone communicates with me. But but for example, I don't respond on social media. I don't respond on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is I just get so much on LinkedIn. And so I have a line on LinkedIn that says, if you want to contact me, email me, because I can't manage another inbox, right? I don't respond on Twitter. I don't respond on any of those places. Now, again, I have luxury because I'm already in a position of power, but I direct people to say my communication is email. And on email, if you email me, you will get a response. Anywhere else, bets are off, right? So I do think that giving yourself time to be thoughtful and giving yourself the time to be responsive is important, because if you don't do that, you're going to miss some opportunities that come through those windows. But for you guys, I would say you should be more responsive on LinkedIn. Sorry. At 64, I get the liberty to not do something that you guys probably still have to do. All right, one more last question.
Yeah, so we are going to conclude. Thank you for everything you said. You really had so many amazing points. As a young psychologist, I have to thank you for shouting out psychology so much. I really appreciate it. So
sure.
For the last question, what is like the main message, the main takeaway from today that you would like to say to our students, especially to our female students, how to really become the best in their field?
I mean, I think unfortunately, I'm going to give you 2 things, because I think these 2 things are important. And the first one is understand who you genuinely are. Like ask yourself that question a lot. Is this what I want to do? Is this who I am? Is this feeding my soul? Does this make me happy? Does this make me sleep at night? Because at the end of the day, none of this is important if you're not happy with your life. And so I think that being able to ask yourself that question and be honest about the answer. And then the second thing is it sounds like a catchphrase, but be a lifelong learner. I mean, constantly being interested in and learning about new things and not closing your mind off. I again, in a different place in my life, I probably have a little more free time than you guys do. Or at least, my work is a certain thing, and then I reserve a lot of time for other things. I read a lot. Since COVID started, I've read almost 300 books. And so like right now, for example, right now, I'm watching all this stuff happening between Taiwan and China, and I realized I don't really know that much about that. And so I just downloaded, luckily The Economist had a great list of books to read if you don't know things about Taiwan and China. And I'm about to go into a period of reading about that. Not for any reason other than it sounds like it's important, and it sounds like it's something I should know about. Now, the problem is there's so much in the world to know about. You can't know about everything. So sometimes you have to choose to say, that's an area, like I just downloaded the book about the making of the atom bomb, the Manhattan Project. And I started reading it, and it was just, it had a lot of physics in it, and I'm not really super great with physics. And I read about 30% of it, and I was like, man, I'm slogging through this and I'm not retaining a lot of it because it's, it's an area that I don't understand that well. And I've decided it's not something I'm gonna, so sometimes I start something and I say, this isn't something, and it's not something that I needed to know. It's something that I was interested in. But, deciding I'm going to be a lifelong learner, and I'm always going to have a topic that I'm learning about. And obviously at this point in your career, I think a lot of that can be about career related stuff. I mean, again, I would strongly encourage you all to become avid readers about human psychology, because regardless of whatever career you take, unless you're dealing with AI exclusively, and AI is designed by humans anyway, so it's going to have some of the failings of human psychology, you're going to have to understand human psychology. So anyway, with that, I do have to go. It was a pleasure. Thank you for all the amazing questions, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Bye.